حان وقت آخر جلسة معنا اليوم، عنوانها التعليم كمحفز للمواطنة الفاعلة بإدارة الأستاذة جويل باس نايت أمريكية في عمان.
Our final session, this one brings together educators from around the world, showing how learning can inspire real action in our communities.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Joelle Bassnight, and I'm the superintendent at the American Community School in Amman, Jordan, and it is my absolute pleasure and honor to be moderating this evening. We have three guests with us, and I think a fourth on the way. As we heard in the introduction, spanning the globe, this is a really exciting time to come together to think about education as a catalyst for active citizenship. And so in just a moment, I'll turn this over to our panelists. They'll give you a brief introduction. They have fascinating stories from across the globe. And then we'll offer a question for each of them to ponder. I will monitor the chat. So if you have questions for our panelists, please pop them in the chat because we'll try to get to them a little later. And as you saw in the last session, we'll wrap up with a little bit of a call for action. So welcome to Mohammed Haaroun, Hani Hassan, Julian Hewitt, and hopefully Rodrigo Marquez very soon. Mr. Haaroun, can we start with you, please? Mr. Haaroun is coming to us from Ghana, so he might be having a little lag time here. So we'll give him a second to please.
Okay, I've unmuted.
Perfect.
Can you hear me?
We hear you. Please continue.
Okay. It's good afternoon in Ghana and good evening in Jordan. As you see, I'm Alhaji Mohammed Haaroun. I have been an educationist. I taught in colleges of education, those days teacher training colleges, before I went into politics. That's why they have the title Honorable Alhaji Mohammed Haaroun. When I was preparing for this particular event, my target was teacher trainees of the Queen Rania Teacher Academy. I assume these were teachers under training, and we call it service training. So, can you hear me? Yeah, can you hear me? Yes, and we call it pre-service training. Then in teacher training, we have pre-service. That's the time they are in the teacher training college. In this case, Queen Rania Teaching Academy. What do you imbibe in them before they go to in-service training? That is when they become teachers. That's why we call teacher professionalism. And that is what makes your teachers, when they have graduated from whichever level, to become global citizens. You do not educate an individual and then you say, I'm educating citizens. You educate an individual, and the education you give that person, the values you imbibe in that person, will make that person become a global citizen or a citizen. For example, as Joel, when you were a child, your father and mother, they knew what you were doing. Then as you grew and you learned values, respect for society, you obey rules, then you go higher on education, and then you are now a global citizen. What we are doing today shows that any of us here has become a citizen, and that is globalization. If we were useless people, we would not have been invited by the Queen Rania Teaching Academy to participate in this kind of webinar. I think this is just what I want to say. And I hope some of the students are with us. There's what we call teacher professionalism. If you are going to be a good teacher, there are certain values that must be imbibed in you during your training. For example, obedience to and respect to community, community participation. If you are active in community participation, either when you are in school or you have finished training and you are teaching, then that's what we call active citizenship. You participate in developing your community. If something wrong is happening in your community, you should be bold to come out and say, this is not in the interest of our community. it won't bring development. This is why we bring development to our community. And that's why we call active citizenship. So for your teachers to do well, first of all, the teacher must know the subject matter of the subject he or she is going to teach. If a teacher doesn't know the subject matter, the teacher cannot teach. And a teacher, to do well, must teach the subject in which she or he has good knowledge in. If a teacher is ignorant in a particular subject and goes to teach that subject, he or she will end up by being mocked by the students. Because you see, that's why we call the discussion. When you are discussing as a teacher, there are students who really know more than you. Don't assume that you are the master of knowledge, you the teacher. You have to assume that you can get ideas from your students. So when you are in a teacher under training, you should know all these things. That when you go out into the community or to the society, don't assume that you know everything. Assume that you can still learn from the community people, or you can still learn from the students you are going to teach. So for a professional teacher to, yes.
Thank you so much. We're going to come back to you in just a moment. I want to be sure that everyone has an opportunity to introduce themselves. So you've just heard
Okay, thank you.
No problem. From Mr. Mohammed Haaroun from Ghana, telling us how important it is to be an active citizen and to care for our community. And now I'd love to hand it over to Dr. Hani Hassan so you can introduce yourself.
Oh, hi, thank you, Joel. How are you? So my name is Hani Hassan. I've been a faculty member at the American University of Beirut for coming to 23 years now, offering courses in a wide range of topics in the philosophy department and also in the civilization studies program, which has recently taken on a new form and format. It is now the critical humanities for the liberal arts program. This is kind of a core curriculum that all students, regardless of their major at the American University of Beirut, have to take a pool of courses, from a kind of what we call a general education program. And that's part of our kind of education approach and towards active citizenship locally and globally, is that, regardless what your major is, regardless what you aim, career you aim to pursue, there are certain subject matters, or at least themes, let's call them, rather than subject matters, that are common to our experience as university students and also as university educators. Because as I say, I've been teaching for 23 years, I would also say I've been a student for that exact same period, which, and Haj just mentioned, is we constantly learn. And particularly with the pace of the current pages developments across the globe, there's a lot that we need to continuously learn on ourselves, on our own, as some earlier panelists mentioned, but also with our students, and I think that's key. Perhaps we'll address this later on. In addition to my teaching, I've also been, for coming up to 12 years now, I've also served as director for a scholarship program at the American University of Beirut, in partnership with the Department of State. This is sponsored by the U.S. Department of State, is the Tomorrow's Leaders program, which is far more than a scholarship program, as the name suggests. This is, again, on, the academics is a great, central component, but the bigger component is, of course, civic engagement, leadership, and, community impact, and, having or assisting, I would say, youth from the MENA region to becoming positive, agents of positive change in their communities. And more recently, just the past year, actually, I've designed and offered a course with the Queen Rania Teacher Academy in partnership with the American University of Beirut on a program for the Teach for the Future diploma, precisely on global citizenship. So I had a lot to learn in preparing that course, particularly as I had to prepare it in Arabic. It was really great experience thinking of these concepts and terminologies that have almost become, second nature to us, thinking of them in English when you're thinking them in Arabic, which is an exercise in, global and globalizing citizenship in itself. So I'll rest there for now, and we'll come back to further issues down the line. Thank you, Joel.
Thank you so much for that introduction and for the importance of us always being both a student and a teacher. It is a continual thing. Thank you so much. Mr. Julian Hewitt joining us from South Africa. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Thanks very much, Joel. Greetings to my fellow panelists and also greetings to all the rest of the delegates. My name, as mentioned, is Jolian. I'm coming to you live from Pretoria in South Africa. And I've always been a social entrepreneur, my professional life, which really means how do you look at the world around you and the complex problems that you're facing and what are the opportunities to see spaces for change. And more recently, the last 7 years, I was heading up the biggest private teaching scholarship in South Africa. And we were really realizing, as we are all in this panel and on this call, the importance of education, and not just education, but the quality of education. And in unpacking that, we understood that, you know, at the end of the day, the biggest lever in this space is really the quality of the teachers. So for 7 years, it was a wonderful privilege and job to find these incredible people and to support them being these amazing teachers, to have impact on a very unequal society in our country in South Africa. And I started getting very, I guess, inspired by the impact that they were having on the ground. And end of last year, I too then qualified as a teacher in the field of high school schooling, subjects in particular. So, and I really wanted to then almost use the opportunity of going downstream, because what I realized is, as a CEO, I would understand certain problems at a high level, but not really what was happening in the classroom and the staff room. And so that's given me a unique opportunity to get into a very underserved school that I'll unpack with you a little bit later on through our MC. But really to also understand, you know, where are we in the system? And I think that's something that I'm very curious around, is that we as educators are working within an ecosystem can have, particularly upstream and downstream, obviously, in our learners and in the system that we work within. And I'm using this opportunity in this under-resourced school to then pursue my PhD in looking at the entrepreneurial ecosystem, particularly in the high school space. So thank you very much, Joel.
And thank you very much. I'm seeing a theme of teacher and student continuing here, and just how important it is for you to experience not only as a leader, but as a student of leaders and leadership programs. Mr. Haaroon, can I ask you to just mute your microphone when you're not speaking, and that way we won't have the
okay.
Thank you so much. And now joining us from Brazil, Mr. Rodrigo Marquez, could you introduce yourself, please?
My pleasure, my pleasure. First of all, greetings to all panelists, greetings to everyone in the world, greetings from Brazil. My name is Rodrigo Marquez. I'm the second generation and CEO of COC Group, which is a private network of schools and colleges in northern Brazil. I'm very close, Brazil is a large country, I'm very close to the equator line, 3-hour flight from São Paulo. And we have K-12, middle school, high school, and also colleges. And we come from one of the states in Brazil with the lowest IDH, Human Development Index, and lowest indicator levels. We are for profit, but we were born strongly with a purpose to change our state in Brazil through a new education model. We believe that education needs to change in order to cope with the challenges of this world, which is volatile, uncertain, and let's say very crazy in some aspects. We don't want to educate for the past. We want to educate for the future. And educating for the future is not only preparing for students to pass in the exams or to entry in the university. They must change the reality. So we built a new curriculum, which is very focused on projects, very focused on competencies, like soft skills, developing soft skills, like they be able to collaborate, they be able to lead, able to solve complex problems in the real world. So in our curriculum, of course, we have exams, but we also test our students in on the impact they make in society. So they need to have like projects where they apply math, where they apply physics and sciences and languages, which brings real transformation to society. That's what our curriculum is about. So in this sense, I say hello to everyone, and I'm very eager to debate, to share ideas and insights and takeaways from what I've been doing in the last 20 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Marquez. So as you've heard, 4 people from across the globe, all equally as passionate, seeing raising the citizens of tomorrow as an act of service. And so we're going to throw them a really easy question to start out with. And that is, given the geopolitical polarization of today, not to mention environmental degradation and everything else that we face in today's world, what attributes might you wish to cultivate in our ecosystems that allow all of us to lead? Mr. Marquez, perhaps we could start with you.
Yes, please. Well, this is a very broad subject, but let me see if I could point. You were saying about focus on polarization. Just let me try to pinpoint something. Example.
Sure, like right now there's so much geopolitical polarization. People are polarized and have a different opinion around the environment. And yet all of us know that within our own ecosystems, we want to raise leaders with a little L and a big L to really be able to go out in front and be the citizens of tomorrow. So I'm curious, what attributes might you wish to cultivate in people within the community to make that so?
Well, as I said, that's a very broad question, but I'll try to give some examples. And it's a great question. Thank you. Well, Brazil is not an exception on polarization and on geopolitical tensions. Actually, today in Indonesia or Malaysia, I think our president is meeting President Trump. President Lula is with President Trump. And with these geopolitical tensions and with this polarization thing, the question for a student is, how am I going first to identify what really matters? Because in the day we live today, it's hard to know what mountain to climb. Because let's take, for instance, fake news and deep fake. How do you understand and how critical are you when you have news and facts that is really not a fact? It's really, gossip, or some people making you to tempt you to think as they think. So the first thing on citizenship is identifying the critical and the real issues. Because let's say again, what is happening today with the meeting with our President Lula with President Trump. So today, Brazil, all over social media, there are a lot of fake news, a lot of things saying that, how do you know if it was a great or not a great meeting? So the first thing is like citizenship, you will be able to think critically. And that's what you do with students, how to identify this. So how do you know how to differentiate what is true and what is not true? And how do you pursue the truth? This is something really hard. Second thing is that in a world before polarization, there is something really important, which is how do you live in a very diversified world? How are you able to build bridges between different people, different cultures, different point of views? This is really important. So in our curriculum, we have so many activities like the Model United Nations. It's part of a curriculum, it's part of our exams. So how they are able not only to defend their interests, but how they build, bridges. Because if you think no man, no country is an island, if you're not able to collaborate, you're not going to be able to solve not only the world's problem, but your problem, because your problem is also the world's problem. For instance, in the next month, we're going to have in Brazil the COP 30, which is the climate summit. So, for instance, in our curriculum, we're going to make like a model COP 30, which is going to happen during the same time as the COP 30 in Brazil. We are the only school that is doing that in Brazil. So students, they make a role play in how they could solve that kind of problem. So I would point that 3 things. First is how you differentiate the truth from the fake news. Second, how you're able to collaborate. And third, how to tackle complex issues that you need to defend your interests, but at the same time, complex problems you resolve that needs third parties and other stakeholders.
Thank you so much. Mr. Hewitt, might you add anything?
Yeah, thank you very much, Joel, and thanks, Mr. Marquez, for your input there. I think the reality is that a lot of these big problems that you chat about, we call them wicked problems, are really overwhelming for any of us on the screen, let alone learners. And so I suppose the first step is just to realize that every community has got significant challenges that are more manageable and more identifiable and more practically relevant to them. And so sometimes rather than being overwhelmed by what we see all around us is to really encourage this idea of a mindset. And I like the idea of using an entrepreneurial mindset, which for me is a core part of global citizenship, to say, you know, what are these issues that are facing your community? And rather than feeling disempowered by them, how can you see possibilities around acting on them? What are potential solutions? What are small little things that we can do? And I think these are obviously aspects that you can address, as Ms. Marquez has said, within the curriculum, but often, you know, I find that it's the people that choose to be involved in these kind of activities that often are the ones that are making a significant contribution outside of a curricula. And so there's a lot of space in that too for learners to have an impact. It does require an educator to take quite a strong role in facilitating this kind of opportunity to see the local challenges and shine a spotlight on them, and then be able to maybe even potentially identify role models in the community who've done similar things, so that there's a sense of these aren't overwhelming, and there's a similar methodology that you can apply. And I think really just the last point that I want to emphasize, and Joel, you mentioned this, is the sense of an ecosystem. And even though you might be tackling something that might seem more localized in your community, I think it's essential that as educators we stand up and realize that we have such a significant role to play in the society where change is really becoming such a significant part of this uncertainty. In seeing that we as educators can play a very strong role in the classroom, in these learners, that we're giving them the kind of tools to be able to look at the community and feel that they have the means to at least start understanding what are the problems and what are the kinds of steps that you can take. And they might not be solving the problems in the community, but what we're doing is we're building that kind of muscle memory for them to realize, if I can do this in this context, then I can see someone who's done this in another reality in my environment. I'm going to feel like I can really take this on and be a lot more passionate rather than feeling overwhelmed. So that would be my contribution. Thanks, Joel.
Thank you so much. Dr. Hassan, what might you add?
Thank you, Joel, and thank you for my colleagues. There's a lot to build on. And I have to say also, speaking of constant learning, I was attending all the previous panels and there was a lot to learn as well. So if I may, just to lead into my thinking out loud here together as a panel, I just want to reference a question that was asked in the chat by one of the participants about 2 panels ago. And it's a great guiding question, I think. So I'm translating. So I think this was Ali Dwairi. So Ali, if I got the translation wrong, please correct me. So the question was, how can, and this connects directly, Joel, to what you were asking as a lead into this discussion. He says, how can you convince me of the importance of global citizenship, which aims at promoting the values of justice, equality, and tolerance, when I do not encounter any of these values, neither locally nor globally, right? So I think was a great question. And the short answer to this, Ali and everyone, was precisely because we don't encounter them. I mean, and this has always been the issue to my mind, is if these values were becoming more every day, if these values, you know, in our encountering these values was a common and a more common occurrence, I think then we could say, well, you know, why are we still stressing on them? So, you know, my response is actually we want to stress on them precisely because though we've been having these conversations for a long while, in December we're coming up to 77 years since the anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, right? So that more than 7 decades. So we've been having these conversations for a while, globally and as human, you know, as human and as institutions of higher education and education. And clearly there's a lot more to be done. And I think that's precisely why these conversations are central to the driving how we're going to approach our ecosystem, as you said, Joel. And so just to build on, I fully agree where Jolyon and Rodrigo were coming from. And I would take it in a perhaps in a more, global direction, building on that and say, I think we need to start focusing more on cultivating human values rather than professional skills. Because I think if you observe everything that's being done at the K-12 as well as higher education, I don't think professional skills is what we're lacking. I don't think proper professional training is what we're lacking. I think there's so much that's been put on into in terms of time and investment and focus into developing doctors and nurses and engineers and educators and sociologists and anthropologists and all of that. So I think we've done a great job in terms of developing and further developing our professional fields. I'm not sure we've been giving the same focus to developing our human values and shared humanity. And I think there's a lot that needs to be focused on there. And I think when we talk about civic education, when we talk about global citizenship, that's really what it comes down to. And I heard this in a couple of panels earlier, this kind of tension between the global and the local. How does one subscribe to the global or participate in the global while not risking losing the local. But I think that again, the kind of ecosystem you want to cultivate is one that says, actually, you can't participate in the global if you've lost the local. And that's the whole point of the global. The whole point of the global is that it brings together so many different locals, but it brings them together in a space of mutual respect and understanding. It brings them together in a space of common concerns and common areas to address. The local is local. But as Jolyon was saying, and Rodrigo was also saying, is there's so much that we share. Where does one start, right? But when you do start, you realize that this is not particular to me. This is actually human, and one needs to think of it from a human perspective, while at the same time being local. Because if I'm going to be able to do anything, I'm going to have to do it locally, right? What does it mean to do things globally unless I do them locally? So this is a kind of, I think, characteristic or mindset, I would say, that I think would be really solid to cultivate. Yeah, so thank you, Joel.
Thank you so much. And finally, Mr. Haroon, what else might you add to this discussion?
Thank you very much, Joel. I'm a founding member of the African Biodiversity Network. I was in KwaZulu-Natal. I was in Pretoria to see how they were helping in keeping the climate change going. If you go to KwaZulu-Natal, Durban, you will find a place called Valley of Thousand Hills. That's where you really see conservation of natural resources. All kinds of trees. You are not allowed to cut down a tree. And there's a law called wild law in South Africa, around KwaZulu-Natal. If you even use your car to hit a tree, there's a lawyer who can sue you for hitting the tree with your car, because the trees are also human and they live. I'm just telling you the extent to which South Africa has taken biodiversity and, for that matter, climate conservation and food security. I was also in Dehradun in India, just at the foothills of the Himalayan mountains. There's a place called Dehradun. That place too, I went there to see conservation of natural resources, trees, and seeing to food security. So if it comes to climate change, I've brought it to my house in Ghana, where I live. If you see my house, it's like a forest, trees all over, varied types of trees are in my house. And I've taken it to the classroom as a teacher. I have been an educational administrator for 32 years. And this is what I emphasize whenever we have what we call participatory learning communities, PLC, where we gather our teachers to tell them to imbibe in them teacher professionalism. And we have added this into the curriculum of PLCs. PLC means participatory learning community. where we bring all teachers. We sometimes invite parents. We invite what we call school board executives, and we discuss issues affecting the school and even sometimes the curriculum. And I spearhead all these things in northern region. And there's something called TTEL, Transforming Education and Learning in Ghana. I'm a founding member of that TTEL. And we are going around the whole country. We have transformed teacher education from teacher training colleges to colleges of education. And we are now transforming secondary schools. And that is what you do. And then what the strategy is that we have gotten teachers to write their own curriculum, so that when they are following the curriculum, they themselves know how and who produced it, and that it is not imposed on them. So that is where we are today.
Thank you so much. So I think that you as a group have identified a number of attributes or competencies that you view as being needed to as cultivated in not only young humans, but older humans. And that is critical thinking, being able to tell the fake from the real, intercultural competence, the ability to collaborate, having an entrepreneurial or real world mindset, being change ready or future ready to serve your ecosystem, and really honing in on those personal human values, maybe that EQ, that humanity that goes far beyond just the technical skills that we assign to any particular calling. And then, of course, we've heard that all of this can happen within a professional learning community that could include students, parents, teachers, everyone. So that's a long list. That's a lot that we hope to see happening in the future. So I'm curious, with all of those competencies in mind, what educational changes would you love to see happen at the governmental or institutional level that would really support cultivating any or all of those competencies in individuals or in the overall ecosystem of the school? And I'm going to throw it out to anyone who wants to unmute.
Can I come out? Can I come up?
Please tell us, what do you think?
In Ghana, as I mentioned, there is no school that can be found in the sky. No institution can be found in the sea. Every institution is on land, and that land belongs to human beings. It could be the government. In the case of Ghana, we have chiefs. Chiefs, they are just like royals. Jordan, we have King Allah. So we have all these things in Ghana. So you have to collaborate. We call them stakeholders in education. So you have to involve the chiefs, the traditional, we call them traditional rulers. You have to involve the students themselves, and then there you can decide what to do. The belongingness will be everybody. Everybody will take it up. And in the curriculum, let the teachers also know that when they were being taught in the training college, them didn't know that with some values. You have to go and learn the community values. If they don't learn the values of the community, the do's and don'ts of the community, they will not fit well in that community, and therefore they will not be good teachers. So in case of Queen Rania teacher students, I would like them, wherever they are trained, they should try very hard to work and fit well in the community. We say that a teacher should act in loco parentis. A teacher should act in the place of the parent of the child. You don't, as a good teacher, you don't maltreat a child because that's not your child. You take the child as your own child. That's why we mean in loco parentis. So it is something that we need to do and get things.
Thank you so much. So
Thank
it's
you. Thank you.
everyone's responsibility, from not only the school, but the teachers, the parents, everyone together. Who else might
Exactly.
add something to that? We'll go to Mr. Marquez and then Dr. Hassan.
Thank you very much. Well, education is a sector that moves very slowly. It doesn't move as fast as we wish. In Brazil and most parts of the world, we have let's say a 19th century educational model with a 20th century professors, 21st century students, and 21st century challenges. How do you create a new educational model, and where it should come from? I think that in a government level, starting with from government, I think that as no one has the right solution, no one yet has like a new model to say this is the best way. Everyone is testing in the world. Wherever I go, Middle East, Europe, Asia, US, Brazil, there are a lot of people testing. But the problem with testing is how government can support your testing, your new model. And in Brazil, it's very hard to do this because we have tight regulation for the education sector. So once I was with the Secretary of Education, and I told her that we should have like a kind of sandbox, as we have a sandbox for the financial sector, where they test new financial tools, new ways of financing, so they could see like new ways of, let's say, giving credit to like people that has no credit score. So how do you do that with education? For instance, Brazil, I'm obliged to have like, let's say, 100 hours per year in order to teach math, science, and so on. But if I change the way I do this, the government can take away my license. I'm not saying that I should not teach. I'm saying that I should have less hours. But the question more is not about hours, it's how. And what are the core competencies for that? And on an institutional level, I think that, especially regarding professors and teachers, we should rethink their role. If you get a 19th century model, and when you prepare to exams, you're not able to have different methodologies. And teachers sometimes they are scared to put in place new methodologies because that might not lead to test exam approval. And this is challenging. And how do you test that? How do you prove that new models, new teaching models could be new ways in order to promote like the changes we need to do? So I would say that in two levels, let's say government level, government should have a sandbox to approve and support testing in order to find new ways, in order to find a new school model, a new college model. And institutional levels, I think we should have like a kind of pact with professors and teachers and society saying, that's where we want to go. And in order to get to this point, we need to do things differently. That's, I would say. I think education needs, just to end my note, like a kind of in Brazil, a national global pact. I think should bring to the table everyone, all our stakeholders, and say, okay, what do we want to be as a country? What do we want to be as society? And I don't see that kind of movement in Brazil. In a few countries I see, but one thing is certain. If we don't change this model, maybe we're going to arrive in 2035, 2040, and most of the challenges in society we're not going to have we're not going to be solved because the problem starts all with the educational model. And I think we should big reform on that. Thank you.
Thank you. A call for courage, I hear.
Yeah.
Dr. Hassan, what would you like to add?
Thank you, Joel, and thank you, Rodrigo, because actually I just want to build precisely where he was coming from. And I think one of the first things I would think of in terms of how do you add these kind of what you call the competencies, and how can you do that in a system that was so beautifully, and tragically described by Rodrigo. It's a 19th century working with the 20th century towards the 21st onwards, and it is quite a challenge. And to my mind, one of the first things I think we'll get into who the we is, because that's a big question. But one of the things we have to do is to really not, to no longer think of these as co-curricular and extracurricular, but these are curricular. And because when you think of first of all, there's always this kind of, curricular, then, in kind of a priorities and hierarchies, and then you get to the co-curricular and the extracurricular. But I think all of these competencies, all of these values we've been discussing, these are curricular. These are at the heart of what it means to educate and what it means to cultivate a learner, right? Because the whole point of it is to translate their learning into positive impact on their societies. I mean, it's not just translate their learning to what exactly? Sure, I mean, towards career and profit, but to what end eventually? And I think that should be remain at the heart of it. And so that's the challenge. How do we get these values and these competencies to be part and parcel of the curriculum, regardless what you're teaching? I think whether I'm teaching natural sciences or social sciences or the humanities or business or whatever it is I'm teaching, global citizenship and the values of global citizenship and social entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship in general is in each and every one of those. Otherwise, we're stuck in a model that is just feeding itself, but it has no outcome, so to speak, right? And so this is, to build on what Rodrigo is saying, is I think there's a call for us being, the ministries, the relevant ministries and government, institutes, as well as educational institutes. And I know a lot of, institutes of higher education have already been going through that exercise, particularly since the COVID lockdown and shutdown, where we had to really rethink everything we were doing in terms of education. But we really need to rethink what it is we do, how we do it, and most centrally, why we do it. And I think, what we do is not, imparting knowledge and just that. And this is something that was mentioned, I think, in the keynote today. Sorry, I forgot the presenter's name. He says, when they did a survey, so much of the way things were being done globally was still teacher-centered. And that's honestly, to my mind, is like, we really need to flip that. It has to be student-centered. And the student here as a partner, and the teacher as a partner, and the leadership and the administration as a partner. The older model is a model where the educator implements policy in terms of, whatever is decided onto the students. But I think nowadays, the design and planning has to work from the end user, so to speak, has to work from the students and the teachers back to policy. Of course, it's a huge mountain to climb, but if we don't climb it, and I honestly, I'm starting to feel a disconnect between some of the things we still insist on doing in the context of the classroom and what is needed and where the students are at, right? And I can give you live examples of students who are studying computer science, and they're already developing apps using language that are not yet taught in their computer science classes, right?
Thank you
And the
so
disconnect
much.
is crazy. Thank you,
Yeah.
Joel.
So I see that we're coming to the end of the hour, and I've heard a call for courage, a call for shared values, a call for agency, for students, for teachers, for the ecosystem, and that call for integration, that as humans, it is more than just the different disciplines. It is an integration of that and human values. Thank you so much to all of the panelists for coming today. And I believe we have some commentators that want to say a few words before we close.
Is it the panelists or the general viewers?
I think that at 8 o'clock, they're going to jump in and wrap us up just right now. Thank you so much.
تختم فعاليات المنتدى لهذا العام. أحب أن أوجه شكري الكبير لكل من شارك وأسهم في إنجاح هذا الحدث الملهم.
Yes, Wafa, 2 days, dozens of sessions, and thousands of educators, all coming together to build a better tomorrow through citizenship and values.
تعلمنا كثيرا وتبادلنا الأفكار وبنينا جسورا من التعاون تمتد عبر العالم.
It's been such a meaningful journey, and I hope everyone leaves inspired, ready to make a difference.
شكرا لكل من كان معنا، وإلى لقاء جديد في منتدى أكاديمية الملكة رانيا لتدريب المعلمين القادم بإذن الله.
Before we sign off, don't forget to stay connected. Follow the Queen Rania Teacher Academy on social media and visit our website to relive the sessions and explore the highlights. By the way, Wafa, are there any certificates for participants?
نعم بالتأكيد سيحصل المشاركين على شهادة حضور، وندعوكم لمتابعة صفحات أكاديمية الملكة رانيا على وسائل التواصل الاجتماعي، وزيارة موقعنا الإلكتروني للاطلاع على أبرز لحظات المنتدى ومتابعة رحلتنا نحو تعليم أفضل للجميع.
Because your feedback is important and valuable, please make sure to fill the feedback survey which you will receive by email soon.
لأن آراءكم تهمنا ندعوكم إلى تعبئة استبانة التغذية الراجعة التي ستصل إلى بريدكم الإلكتروني قريبا.
Thank you everyone and goodbye from both of us.
إلى اللقاء ونراكم العام القادم بإذن الله.